Okay, we get going here again, and I want to introduce Gilbert Lavoie to you. Specialist at the USA, Dr. Gilbert Lavoie, internal medicine, occupational medicine. He's going to be talking about his latest book, which is The Shroud of Jesus and the Sign John Ingeniously Concealed, published in a couple of years ago by Sophia Institute Press. I want to mention also that in 2019, he and Tom completed the organization of the photo collection of Bern Miller. Bern is one of the photographers on the original Stirk project in 1978. That collection is now available on the internet, and we'll give you the website, shroudphotos.com. And the other thing to note here is that he recently worked with the internationally known sculptor Pablo Guardo to produce a three-dimensional replica of the image of the man in the shroud. And the bust of that sculpture is available again. So check that out as well. So I'd give him a look. It's all yours. Okay.
Thank you. I hope you can hear me all right. Yes? Wonderful. Well, it's really a pleasure to be with you because it's wonderful to be with a group of people that are seekers of the glory of God. And certainly in the study of the shroud, we are seeking something that's magnificent that God has given us. During this talk, I've got an awful lot to do, and generally I just go ahead and speak, because sometimes I'm going to read, and I like you to just follow along, because I like to get in these next 45 minutes my story to you. But partly usually I'll spend 4 hours and then relax so we can just chit-chat and so forth, but in this particular time, we want to really cover a lot of material. So we're going to start, we're going to basically, we have a pointer here, I guess, this. And is this a pointer? We have a pointer. Oh yeah, okay. Pointer. All right. So we're going to talk about the medical and scriptural study of the Shroud of Turin. What does this all mean? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about two events that took place on this plot. And the first event is this micrograph of the blood area of the chest. And here we're going to be looking at, you see this is taking over the chest wound, and you see the blood that's in between the fibers here. Most of the other has been abraded away. And this blood is from the, it has been heavily proven to be blood. And and people who were at Berry camp saw that this blood soaked through to the back of the cloth and was placed over moist spots of the skin. I know that because I've done the experiments, and we put cloth over blood. It soaked right through to the back, and that's what you see in the shroud. The blood we see in the first one, the Didactics of John's narrative of Jesus' passions. The blood marks in the shroud are the last blood flows from your body. The Jews considered this lifeblood, which is defined as the blood of atonement. It is Jesus' precious blood of atonement for our sins. These blood marks were a natural event. And we know, so now they're on to the second event, and that's a micrograph taken at the image of the area of the nose at 64 times magnification. And here we see, again, these threads, and on these threads are these very fine fibers. The fibers are way less than the diameters of the hairs on your head. The yellow fibers are building blocks of the image. They are superficial and are only one fiber deep. Chemically opaque, dye, or stain are on the cloth. The change in the color is due to dehydrated oxidation, aging of the cloth. This could be caused by heat, light, and acid. No one has reproduced this image on the cloth at this microscopic level. It is unique in the world and continues to be investigated. Now, regarding the creation of the image, we know that the image is not made by human hand. Is it a natural event or is it a supernatural event? So let's go on. Confirming that the man of the shroud died in a crucified position. we have an off-image blood mark right here, and I didn't know what caused that blood mark, and so finally I placed the cloth over my body one day, and then this is what we found. So note the image of the blood mark again is on the right elbow of the man covered by this cloth. Okay, so here's the blood mark. It comes right down the arm. It goes right off the body and then spools. So we did a tracing of that, and we placed that tracing over a volunteer. And from this direct frontal view, we see that the off-image mark is not visible. So where is it? And here it is, right here. It's on the back of the upper arm. So you have the cloth draping around the body, and it catches the back of the upper arm. So we go on to, this is not how the cloth was draped. This is just to show you what's happening. The origin of the blood flow started here at the wound, flowed down a near vertical forearm and around the back of the upper arm. It collected into a round pool of blood on the underside of the arm. And we all know that if you want to wash dishes or something, you say, hand me a towel, your hands are wet, you feel that water dripping around. So it's a real event. So what does this tell us? First of all, it tells us that the man died in a crucified position, as you can see. And the blood marks were made by a contact process, simply cloth soaking into the blood soaking into the cloth. Now the cloth covered a three-dimensional supine man, and that's very important information because the other blood marks are show the distance of the dimensions of height and width, but this shows you the third dimension, that of depth. It was truly a three-dimensional man on his cloth. Now, the image is not made by a contact process. The reason why is that we know that the cloth had contact at the back of the upper arm, yet there is no image there. So it isn't any kind of organic matter that was on the body that caused this. And finally, the image is not the result of a natural event. First of all, for about 125 years, people have been studying, trying to figure out a natural event which caused this. They haven't come up with an answer. And natural events are ubiquitous when they occur. If they occur on the front of the body, they should also occur on the side where we know the cloth actually sucks. So it is an unnatural event. Now here, this is the study. John Jackson called me one day and asked me to go and help him with regard to understanding the position of the crucified man, so we had a couple of volunteers, and he said, "Oh, I got swivels for the wrist." I said, "Well, I'd like to have a swivel for the foot as well, because I think there's only one nail." And so when we put the gentleman up, he was balancing on one nail like this, you see, on the swivel, I should say, and then all of a sudden, thump, he falls into this position falls to his right, like this, and that was amazing to us because that's what we actually predicted by looking at the blood mark. So the man is pushing himself upward with his seat. His left foot is over his right. We did the experiment again, we put the right foot over the left, and he would go in the other direction. So this pushing upward, it takes the pressure off the arms and allows him to use his chest muscles to breathe in and out. His right arm is flexed. Here, the elbow caused right at the front of the forearm to be nearly straight down from the cross. This is the exact position that caused the blood flow that's resulted in the off-image blood mark that we just looked at. Now the man is not pushing up with his legs. He's hanging from his arms. The body is central but lower down with the knees. This would be the position of exhaustion or death. The left foot is over the right. In this position, he can only breathe by using the muscles between his chest and abdomen, his diaphragm. What happens here is his chest is fixed in the position of inspiration caused by hanging from his arms. His airflow is cut by 70%. His blood pressure is falling. And people's dying of asphyxiation once he can no longer lift himself by the legs. Therefore, that's why our soldiers in the past the Gospel of John, grateful legs. Once those legs are broken, there's no support. Can't last very long. The creation of the image, again, we say the image made by human hands. We know it's not. It's not a natural event. Is it a supernatural event? And how do we define a supernatural event? What we call supernatural events, we also call miracles. John calls them signs, and Jesus calls them works. And some examples of works would be marriage at Cana. Jesus is turning water to wine. And what he's doing really is taking H2Os, those elements, and he's turning into carbon atoms. Right? He's creating something, and of course, his disciples saw this and they realized who he was. They saw his glory because he was doing something, creating something, and only God can create something. So another example of that is this kind of a phenomenon is, of course, Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And of course, we know that Lazarus was dead for 4 days. In the medical world, we're worried about the brain after somebody doesn't have oxygen for 4 minutes. So what God has done here in Jesus basically said, come out, Lazarus. He really recreated his whole body. And so these are examples of an event. These are events that are outside of our ordinary understanding of time and space. Context of Jesus' life, our definition of a supernatural event is an event that is outside of our ordinary understanding of time and space. Now, Jesus makes it very clear why he does his works. And I'd like to sort of read this with you here. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. Jesus said to him, have I been with you all this time, Philip, and you still do not know me? Whoever has seen me and seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father is in me. But if you do not, then believe me because of the works themselves. So works are very, very important as far as Jesus is concerned. He comes and he does these works, and so that we know who he is. Now, is the creation of the shroud image a supernatural event, a work of God by changing water to wine? Let's see if we can answer that question. So we'll start by looking at the blood marks on the face. In here we have a photograph of the shroud and the negative, which is the positive, and we see the blood here is negative, and we see the blood is in the hair all along and also on the forehead. I had that picture, of course, in my office. It was across from me, and one day I said, I wonder if these blood marks are going out a little far, like the blood off the left elbow. So I brought this home with me. I had my kids do a cutout with me of just the blood marks of hair, and then of a full-size image of the shroud face. And then I took this, I had a volunteer. I like you to remember this volunteer's face because we'll talk about it a little later. But he's lying down on his back in a horizontal position of burial. And so we put the cloth over him and tank was applied to the volunteer's face of the blood marks. And when we took that off, we see that the blood mark did not originate from the hair, but originated from the temples and the cheeks, sides of the face. So as the cloth would drape over the face, it picked up these very moist blood marks and so forth. So now if you see the image here straight on, the blood marks on the hair originated from the spots that were on the base. So what are we really talking about here? We're talking about an interesting phenomenon because we have now the blood in the hair. It's just as this. So what happened would be the only way to explain this in a logical fashion is that the image took place after the blood marks were formed on the base, as if the cloth actually straightened out. And in between the blood marks that were originally on the temples and cheeks, we now have this photograph of Jesus' face. and the hair that was on the sides of his face. So what we have here is we note the hair is on the sides of the face, but note the book, how did they get there? Who stretched out the floor? Where did the energy come from that produced the image? This observation points to the event of image formation that is outside our ordinary understanding of time and space, a supernatural event. No one's been able to explain this at all. And so now we're going to talk about the image of the raised man. And before I get into that, I have to say to you that at this point in my life, way back, I have to go to confession here, and I hate to do that in front of a crowd, but here I am. So, what it was is that before I went on to this next story that I'm going to tell you, when I looked at the Shroud, I was really fascinated by it. I didn't know how the image was made. I knew this was really now. I started as a skeptic, but then I became a believer because I realized it was truly a crucified man under the spot. You can see that that would be the case. So I did that. I said, I did put this, but he's just lying there in death. And I said, I can't see anything on there that convinces me that this is the moment of the resurrection, even though we have all these wonderful things. That was my personal feeling. But I have to confess to you that I was wrong, because in this came to my mind the image of the raised man. I would like to go on and see. Now here is a black and white photo of the negative image of the face as it's seen on the original Shroud. So you are all remember this man? I had the fellow that was lying down. And so when I was very excited about getting that negative back, remember those days, back in when a lot of you can remember this, you used to get a film and you get the positive and negative. So I looked at my negative. I said, I was hoping this negative would look a little bit like the man of the Shroud, but it didn't. And I was very disappointed because the man of the Shroud has sort of light areas around the eye, the nose, and the lip, and here it's just a bland look. So I was really discouraged. And but all of a sudden I started looking through the rest of my negatives, and all of a sudden I came across this negative of the same man as in my volunteer, and he has light areas around his eyes, under his nose, and his lips, like you see in the Shroud. But the interesting thing was I happened to take this picture by mistake. He was sitting by Johnny was table, and I took this picture. He was upright, and these were just shadows of normal life and light that comes from above, and that's what we have. It matches what we see on the Shroud. So that was an awesome moment for me, because all of a sudden they said, this man looks like he's upright. He's not lying down. And I actually looped out of the room in awe. And then I got my composure back, and I went back in and started thinking about this some more. And I did a study of light coming from above, in comparing what we see on the Shroud, and we see, again, the very same light also light under the pectoral muscle, between the finger and under the hand, just like the Shroud. So I said, well, is there anything else that really can convince me that this man is upright? He looks like shadows here. And so I started looking at it. I said, my God, look at the hair. And we see the hair, how it flows down the back. And we go here, here's a young lady with her hair, and here the Shroud, and his hair flows down. And we look at the back of the man, it's the woman, and how the hair flows down. Being a physician, I see a lot of people that come in with hair, long hair, and as I help them to get on, laid down on the table, long hair, spiky hair, greasy hair, whatever, all hair falls back. It doesn't look like the person's upright, but this does look like the man of the Shroud is just upright. Then if you have the young lady lie down, this is what you get. Now, this is a photo. This is a sculpture that we did. This is the sculpture we're talking about. You can see the bust of it downstairs, and you see how the shadow is around the face, and we see a little shadow here around the face that the hair does. It was one of the most interesting things we did as we were doing it. We realized that there were shadows that sort of look like the man of the Shroud. That's set in our well here. Now, here's a man who is upright, and that gravity has an effect on hair, but it also has an effect on body form. And this man, this is actually not a photograph, but a drawing of this man who's upright. And then you see his body form, hair falls to his back, on his back, and you see the form of the man is standing. Now we take that man, we place him on a plate of glass, and you see how it's flattening at the back of the body, some lower legs, and also the hair. That's what you see when a man's lying down. And if you compare the man here, who is upright, with the man of the shroud, you see that there's none of this, no areas flattening anywhere, and he looks like he is not lying down. And we know that Christ had to be lying down. So, this man, for all intents and purposes, is a man who's upright. Hair falls to his shoulders. We have the shrouds and so forth you've talked about, and we have no flat in his body. So the image is an upright man, his hair falls to his shoulders, and his feet do not touch the ground. So we have what is a supernatural event, yes, a work of God. Now, it is of great interest that the maximal observable visual density of the front and back of the image are nearly the same. The weight of the front of Jesus' body was only the weight of the cloth. Unlike the front of the body, the back of the shroud bears the weight of a 175-pound man. That means the weight of the body was in a supine position likely played no role in the image formation. Furthermore, this 175 pounds of weight should have flattened the hair in some of the rounded anatomy of the backside of the body when placed in the supine position, but we do not see the expected flattening on the shroud of the image. Instead, we see the hair float and the rounded anatomy of the back of a man upright. Now, since my first encounter with the shroud in 1978, physicians have noted, and I agree with them as a physician, that what we are seeing in the shroud image is early rigor mortis, and that's the temporary, that is a temporary stiffening of post-mortem stiffness of the muscles. In other words, muscles get very stiff. But like hair, the skin and subcutaneous fat of the body do not undergo rigor mortis. Only muscles undergo rigor mortis. So regardless of the stage of rigor mortis, when Jesus was laying on his back, large areas of the skin and subcutaneous fat on the back we have flattened immediately, but we do not see this flattening on the shroud. So in conclusion, the upright position of the man in the shrouds was established by anatomical observations of hair and body form. What happens to long hair if one is upright as opposed to being supine? What happens to the body form if one is upright as opposed to being supine? There are no hypotheses presented here. These observations are simply what is evident. More on the forensics of the image and the sculpture can be found in the handout which are given. Now here is this is the cross image of the man. This is our sculpture done by Pablo Eduardo, the master of art anatomy. And we spent 3.5 years developing this on and off, measuring and remeasuring this to match. And the bust about to. Upright but not standing, where to look for answers. So I had an upright man, all of a sudden I had an upright man, I didn't know what to do with it, I had no answers, I didn't know where to go, so I said, well, I'll go to the Bible. So I went to the Bible, I started to read, I went to Luke, and I found nothing about upright man. Just lifted up like that. I went to Mark and Luke, nothing. I got to John, chapter 12, verse 32, and this is Jesus speaking, and I, when I am lifted up from the earth, will draw all people to myself. Now, I said, my gosh, I'm reading something that's exactly what I'm looking at on the shroud. This is incredible. Of course, the right under that is talking about, well, this is to explain how he was crucified. However, as I started to look into this, with people like Raymond Brown, really very good commentators, and people in the church, the covenant Raymond Brown writes, the culmination of Jesus' career is when he is lifted up toward heaven in death and resurrection, drawing all men to himself. And of course, the full thought of that is that if he just lifted up on a cross, then there's no eternal life, there's no resurrection, there's no ascension. And the church itself, when we read about, I should say, the gospel, the study of the gospel, to be lifted up in the Gospel of John includes crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension to the fathers. And so we find that in Ignatius Catholic Bible and other Bibles. That's the way it's looked at. So, after finding the list of man, I realized that I had no place to go other than to delve deeper into the Gospel of John by placing what I forensically observed on the spot into the context of Jesus' life. A door opened into new insight as to what John had written about of Jesus. Now, if John knew there was an image, why didn't he just say so? And he didn't say so because he was a Jew and he understood the laws of the Jewish people, what would happen. That anything with hand or foot upon it, anything with a man upon it would be considered an item of idolatry, and it would be destroyed by his colleagues and thrown, as they say in the mission, and thrown into the Dead Sea. And so he knew that it had to remain absolutely secret, and if it didn't, it would have been destroyed. So did John give us information that tells us about the sign, the work of God that we see in the shroud, the raised body of Jesus? And I tell you that I took 2 years of graduate courses in seminary. I took certain Gospel of John and also the New Testament and Old Testament. And then I spent 10 years studying the Gospel of John. And I just want to share with you what happened. Yes, John did this by first connecting the two narratives to the death and temple narratives. These connections bring to light a sign that Jesus predicted 2,000 years ago. Now, John tells us the importance of signs, and this is what he writes. Now, Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and through believing you may have life in his name. And so, without the works, as he admits and says and states, these works, these signs, are important to us. That's why we believe, and they are important to future generations. That's why he writes about them. So they're very, very important. And now, how does John connect these narratives? So let's start with John's true story. What did he see and what did he believe? We all know the story, and we heard it earlier today. The story of Mary Magdalene going and finding in him felt that the body was taken, went inside John, the beloved disciple, and Peter, who went with who's. And so, of course, Peter goes in first, and then John, and when he walks in, and he saw and believed. What did he see and what did he believe? And as far as you're concerned, throughout our Catholic faith and whatever, and hearing you from the pulpit all these years, John saw basically in every tomb, and he also saw the bus lying there, and he believed that Jesus resurrected. However, we see, excuse me, okay. We see the next sentence, the last part of that sentence, that I should say of that paragraph. For as yet they did not understand the Scripture that he must rise from the dead. He's basically telling you right there in the tomb, he saw and believed. He's leaving it a problem for us, and a lot has been written about this over the years. And for as yet they did not understand the Scripture that he must rise from the dead. He's telling you that he doesn't understand that he's resurrected. That's basically what he's saying. And so what did he see and what did he believe if he didn't believe in this resurrection? So to answer those questions, let's sort of start here by looking at the Jewish principle Gezerah Sala, referring to which passages in which same words occur should be interpreted with reference to each other. Basically, if you have a paragraph and it has certain words in it, and another paragraph, the same words in it, we should connect them. They do that with the Old Testament and New Testaments. However, John actually does it within his own Testament, within his own Gospel of John. Now, let's look at that. As for what John saw, here's the tomb narrative and the death narrative. Here's the tomb narrative, and here's the connection. These words here that are he saw and believed, and then he reads in the death narrative, he saw and believed. These are connected. And so why would he want to connect these regarding to what he saw? You know what? This is what he's doing. This is John's description of the death scene. But when they came to Jesus, they saw that he was already dead. They did not break his leg. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. As to the body position of Jesus, John is describing him while he is still on his cross. He would have been raised upright, and his hair would fall to his shoulders, and his feet would not touch the ground. Does John's little description of the death scene sound familiar? Indeed, except for cross he is. It is an accurate description of what we see and what John saw on the shroud, an upright man lifted up. So this is what he saw. And as for what John believed, the tomb narrative is connected now to the temple narrative. And he saw and believed, for as yet they did not understand the Scripture. Again, believed Scripture, the rise from the dead. We connect that to the temple narrative, raised from the dead, believes in Scripture. So we're connecting the tomb story to the temple story. And so what's happened here? The temple narrative, here we are in the temple narrative. This is just chapter 2 in the Gospel of John. And we can all remember the cleansing of the temple. Jesus goes to the temple and he's not very happy. He sees everything going on, the sale and animals and so forth, and turns over all the money, all the money and so forth, and it causes a real mess. And nobody's happy with him, I guess, and that's the way I felt all my life, that that's what he had done. And so the Jews who were in authority said, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" And so basically what Jesus had said, "Take these things out of here, stop making my Father's house a marketplace." It's really the words, "my Father's house a marketplace." At that point in time, he's doing something very special, because it's early in the gospel, and what is he doing? He's telling the whole world, the public, that he is the Son of God by those words, "my Father's house a marketplace." So the Jewish authority don't say too much about this, but in chapter 5, he basically does the same thing again, calling God his Father, and at first they want, that's blasphemy, and they want to kill him for that. So they're really, when they ask for a sign, they're very much concerned about the fact that he's just called himself a Son of God. So he answers them, he gives them a sign, and the sign is, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And it would be, John is very clear, but he was speaking not about the temple that the Jews thought, but he was speaking of the temple of his body. And so Jesus says, so Jesus is very careful, because what we see in the shroud is a destroyed body, and he raises it up. That's what we see. So, what sign do you show for doing this? Jesus, in response to the question, Jesus predicts a visual sign that will show everyone the Son of the Father, the Son of God. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. In the tomb, John saw the sign that Jesus predicted, and at that moment believed that Jesus is the Son of God. It was his epiphany. So we have here the image of an upright man whose hair falls to his shoulder and his feet do not touch the ground. That's what Jesus predicted. That's the sign that tells the world who he is. What does this all mean? It is only through John's witness that we know the meaning of the image for the man of the shroud. The raised man of the shroud is a sign that Jesus predicted 2,000 years ago in the temple of Jerusalem. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. This sign tells the world that Jesus is the Son of God and the bread of life. Now, we humanity lifted Jesus up on a cross, and God raised him up at resurrection and ascension to himself. The image of the raised man of the shroud is a reflection of the power of glory, his crucifixion, death, resurrection, and ascension to his Father. So on this plot is a reflection of the final event of the whole story of salvation, our salvation. Thank you very much. I'd like to say this for one thing. I say I gave you a handout there, so please be sure to read the 2 additional presentations, which are extensions of this presentation. The raised man in the shroud, the forensic of the sculpture, the sign. In John's Assaji story, Jesus is the Son of God and the bread of life. That there on the QRs there, you can just go home and just take a look at that. You can actually get to those presentations right away. Please also see the bust, the bust of the sculptor called the Sign at Exhibit Hall. It's difficult. We had to take this on our plane. First time we took a 60-com this sculpture, and we were a nervous wreck that something would happen, whatever. But anyway, we got there. So please go upstairs and see it. It's beautiful, and it's just, of course, the bust of the whole sculpture. Not the whole sculpture, to be sorry. It couldn't bring that along. Now, and for more information, the book of the Shroud of Jesus and the Sign of John of Jesus, you can see it was available through Amazon. You can get that as QR. Also, that's on your handout. So I'm open to any questions that you may ask or want.
Wouldn't they normally wash the body before burial?
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful question. What happens is that it's true that they do wash the body in the Jewish world, and that's true today, that they wash the body prior to burial. However, you'll find a nice chapter in my book. My wife and I spent about 1.5 years studying it. That we found that because I wanted to know when I started doing this work, I wanted to know how the Jews buried their dead. Because I said, if I'm going to get interested, that's what I'm going to do. So I couldn't find out anything going back into the Catholic world. I had to go back into the Jewish world. And I immersed myself, my wife and I immersed ourselves going back to the Jewish world, going to the Mishnah and talking to the experts and so forth. We finally got the answer from a wonderful guy, a Jewish rabbi out in New York City. Anyway, it turns out that there's an exception to the rule of washing. If a man dies a violent death and blood flows at the time of death, that blood it cannot be wine. It's considered life blood. Okay, and what you see on the shroud, okay, it's the last blood flows of Christ. He was terribly deep in blood. If you were with me in an emergency room, I remember the first time I saw this, the young man came in and he was just loaded with blood. And I said, oh my gosh, what has happened to his head? So he went to his head, and he had this a little tiny cut in his head, that's all. And just one suture, he was gone. Now, can you imagine all these wounds on the head? tremendous amount of bleeding went on, so his body is doing covered with blood. And then the scourging, blood all over. So all that blood dries, okay? And so what you're seeing are the very last blood flow that are moist. And when the body, because I did the experiments as well as the transfer of blood flow, and when I talk about the people that were able to look and see the blood, actually when they covered these and we wrapped him and bound him and so forth, that blood just soaks through to the back right away. It soaks into the blood, it's moist, and then it's done, no more. And so it just soaks in, and this blood is the life blood, and that blood is considered the blood of atonement, not only by us today, but by Jesus and his apostle. You can imagine at the Last Supper when Jesus talked about the blood, this cup of blood, all these people had in mind that the last flows of blood from a man who's dying is the blood, lifeblood, and the blood of atonement. So that's what we see in the shroud. I used to want to study the blood, but I don't even want to touch it now because this is the blood of atonement. This is the blood of Jesus. This is the blood that saves our soul. This is the sacrifice that he made to bring us the Holy Spirit that gives us eternal life. So that's what the body was not washed. The body was definitely buried with the body, and that's what we see in the shroud, is life's blood. Yes.
Thank you for this wonderful exposition, for all the work over years in your publication. Can I ask three interrelated questions that I think you brought out here today? How do you make sense of the fact that insofar as that the chin is close to the sternum, that we don't see the hair coming in front of the face at all? Why is there an image of the bottom of the feet that correlates to the blood flows that have the same shape? And why are we assuming a light source from above?
Okay, let's start with the first one about the chin going all the way through. It's very interesting. If his chin went all the way like this, okay, and you're looking at him, you would have an entirely different looking face. And as we were doing the sculpture, you have to be very careful as far as the tilt of the head is concerned. Because there's no nair. You can't see the nairs of his nose. So the head had to be tilted down a certain amount. But you see the mustache here. So it can't be turned out, tilted down too much, because you would lose a mustache there. So the tilt of the head is not all the way down the chin. So therefore, you're not going to get hair sprawled in almost like this. It's just slightly tilted. From a medical perspective, I was really fascinated to find this out. The fellows when we were doing the crucifixions, the mock crucifixions they talked about, we had one guy that wanted us to stay up there on the cross forever. I kept saying, you got to get down. But I don't want to, put too much hour, too many times, too much. It was a whole day going on. But he insisted on staying up there. And so I said toward the end of that, I said, look, put your head down. You're not bending your head. I want you to see you bend your head down. You bend your head down. It says, I can't bend it down. I can only go this far. I want to bend down too. No, I can't do it. See, the muscle spasm, the trapezius and so forth, prevented him from literally bending his head down that far. So the head wasn't bent down to the chin. Physically, because of the spasms. And he went into rigor with that, in that kind of position. We have to remember he's sort of hanging like this. He was really hanging like this for about at least 45 minutes by the time they took him down. So he went into rigor, and that's why we have the chest expanded, because when the arms were up like that, it expands the chest. We note that because the chest was expanded of the guy. And when we did the blood study, for the wound at the side, people did fun studies and they say, this is the fake shroud, because the wound of the side, the blood should just go all the way down his side, all the way down his body, and it doubled. But it didn't when we did it. Because what I did is I bought some normal saline and I put, bread material in it, and you hung yourself in the positions that these wounds were. And so as the blood came down the wound in the side, it actually, the chest was expanded and so forth, it actually came to that edge of the rib and dropped because the stomach was sort of, the epigastric area was like this. So it just dropped off to the ground. So it's exact and perfect. So that's explains the second question.
Feet. The feet bloodstains corresponds to the bottom of the feet, and yet you posit that the body is hovering in the air and in the erect position.
Okay, so the blood of the feet, that's a real problem from the point of view of trying to understand it. It takes a lot of time to put that together. People have the idea that he has sleek feet flat on the bottom, but that would be very difficult to do. When he's lying down, his legs, when you do the measurements of this man, those legs have been stretched out to a certain point. Originally, when they took him down, his arms were like this and his legs were bent, and because that's the position that you wouldn't, he literally push himself up anymore. So his legs are somewhat stiff, his arms are stiff because of rigor mortis. They broke the rigor mortis, and they also had the break into the leg. So they kept the feet together because I think part of that reason is they didn't want to do anything to the blood. They didn't want to separate the blood. The blood was very important. In fact, the blood on his body was moist, okay, and it was very fragile. And there was a study done by a Jesuit who said, well, this isn't real because all these blood marks are intact. When you take a body down, you're going to mess up the blood marks because they're fragile. But the reality is, this is a Jewish burial. They're very concerned about the blood, life's blood, and they don't want to touch it. They're very careful with it. They're even careful today with Orthodox Jews. So they were very careful taking him down. They didn't mess up the blood marks, which indicate more that it was a Jewish burial, because those blood marks weren't affected. But so now you're laying down, okay? You can't bring your feet all the way down like that. So you're laying down, the full length of the body is laying down because it's about 6 feet full length. If you have his legs really bent up, so you could put his foot on the shroud, when you sort of straightened him out again, you'd have a man 6'5" or something. But he's 6 feet, and his legs are pretty much stretched up. But his legs are laid down like this, and this is his foot, sort of like it's flexed like this. Not quite down, but flexed like this. And the froth really had to have been brought up to his bloody, it was brought up like this, okay? And so when you create the image, when you go through and we went through the image and do the anatomy of the image, the blood, the feet are sort of like this, but and you take the bull back to the shroud and you bring it down, and it brings it right to the heels, and then you have extra feet, you have extra thought there. You have to literally have to bring it up. So the feet were like this, and the thought is brought up. So he's not standing, but the blood marks are really there. He's upright. He looks like he's upright. His feet are crossed. He looks like he's still in a crucified position, practically. So basically, I don't know if that answers your question. I'm just trying to give you the anatomy and what this looks like.
If you understood the question, there's two moments you suggest. One is when he's in a supine position, and there are bloodied soles of the feet transferred to the cloth.
You're right.
And the second moment, once in the upright position, and now the cloth held taut, and was also a projection of the image of the soles of the feet.
Right, and that's just the blood. That's just what we're seeing of the blood that got onto the cloth. But it doesn't have anything to do with. Listen, this is what I'm going to give you the answer to that question is. The answer to that question is that his body actually separates from the blood marks. Okay, that you see him upright in that figure, and his body. You don't see the feet that well, but his body is upright, but the blood marks are still in the cloth. And why, in other words, the body, we're talking about two different things. We're talking about blood marks, okay, that are on the cloth, and we're also talking about anatomy of the body, which is entirely different. The anatomy of the body indicates that the man is upright. The blood marks indicate that he was laid out. There was a third thing.
Oh, why do you assume the light source from above, the head?
Well, I assume that's what we do in human life and where we're at. For example, in this room, the light source is from above. When we go outside, the light source is from above. So in nature, in life, our light sources are from above. Now, if you are standing up in life in a normal day, where outside or where your light source is from above, and the shadows in your body are typical of your being upright. If you lie down, those shadows are no longer there because you're in a different position of your body this way. So you use your light source using different shadows. You don't capture the shadows. Just like I showed this picture of the man lying down, took a picture of him and there was no shadows. But when he was upright, the light was allowed to cast shadows. So Chief, do you understand what I'm saying about that? Okay. All right. Does that answer your question?
It's okay.
I think it does, but I have another question.
Sorry, continue to tell. You showed a photograph of your body to when he was upright.
Right.
And the negative of that.
Right.
And that volunteer had a light source from above.
Right.
And that photograph, then, it turns out, matched the shadows of banana shop.
Right. The one who was upright showed matched the Shroud. The one who was lying down, there was no shadow. Right.
That's it.
That's exactly right. So that's the data, and that's what I'm saying. The difference between shadows of a man who is lying down and the shadows of a man who is upright are entirely different. However, and the same was I think that explains it. Thank you very much. Okay, one more question. I think we'll stop. One more.
This same one from Shine Tanner saw in vision. And that's because Jesus, because he was a humpback. Jesus upright. Are you thinking that described this?
No, it's when he came in, he would see the image. Okay, and that's what caused. And Jesus said, as far as he came in and saw his image, and Jesus predicted that he would be raised up, and so it's very easy. John was the one who would have been there when he buried him. You would have seen how his hair and his face, the level of his face. And now he would have walked in there and saw that the hair that was on his face is now in his hair, and that the hair is falling down, just like he saw him on a cross. Because this is seeing him on a cross, and you see him buried. That position pain because he was lying down. But now, now his body showed his hair coming down because that's the way he talked of the cross. So that's very quickly he uses the sight for that. See immediately if Jesus talked about being raised, you would have remembered what Jesus said. You would have had the fifth view of understanding. Jesus had let this series just the signs. It tells everybody that he's Son of God. Thank you very much.
Good work. Thank you, Tom. To the interpretation of the Daniel Rakuda the same. So a panel discussion with skeptics and agnostics. How about you, Ryan? You know,